Hello and welcome to the Work Crowd's Marketing Communications Bootcamp series. This is our first session in this series, a 7-part series, really to help businesses rethink and reboot their marketing communications strategies as we come out of ease down and we look to get through hopefully this terrible pandemic that we've all had to endure. So I'm delighted to be joined today to launch the first in our series of the Marketing Communications Bootcamp. I'm joined today by Alex Blanes and Patrick Muir, who collectively have got about over 30 years marketing experience from both B2B and B2C side. Alex describes himself as a SaaS, growth hacker, customer obsessive marketeer. So looking forward to hearing what he has to say in terms of developing a marketing strategy to help reboot our businesses. And Patrick, who's had extensive experience from both major corporates like Morgan Stanley to Egg to innovative tech startups such as Sherpa, is going to also be talking about how we should be rethinking, re-looking at our business strategy and rebooting our businesses to face the new world that we're going to be entering into. So just as way of introduction to myself, my name is Alice Weightman. I'm the founder and CEO of The Work Crowd and also of Hanson Search. The Work Crowd is an online platform that connects businesses to expert freelancers across the whole marketing mix. So from content writers, strategists, PR professionals across UK, Europe and the Middle East. We have an army of expert freelancers, all vetted, over 5,000 to support businesses during this time. Hanson Search is a more traditional headhunting business that finds heads of teams from comms and marketing and digital and supports businesses finding those core permanent staff. So Patrick, I'd love to kick off with you actually. We had a great conversation the other day talking about this new world that businesses are now finding themselves in, and really, you know, what businesses really need to do to start developing their marketing strategy to help reboot themselves.
Yeah, thanks, Alice, and good afternoon, everybody. So I think the first thing to say before we get into it is we're kind of all key workers now. Everybody in business, everybody who's running a business, setting up a business, running a department or whatever else, you know, we're all very much needed to do the right things, make stuff happen and get the economy working again. And it's really, really important whether we feel we've been forgotten, forgotten by the government, or, you know, some of the schemes haven't worked so well for us, or maybe they have or whatever. You know, now's the time we need to get on and do, frankly. And that's really the theme running through what I'm going to talk through, based on, as you can see, a few grey hairs, which give me the benefit of a bit of being able to look forward with some hindsight of what's happened in the past. Because the first things I'd say is every economic shock, every recession that I've seen, and I've seen a few of them all the way back to Black Monday in sort of the 1980s, through third world debt, through the banking crisis, and to this one. Every single one of them is different in terms of how it happened and sometimes where the shockwaves are felt. But they're all the same in terms of how the successful businesses react to those situations and who makes it through the other side. So that's the first thing I think I'd like to leave with you is, you know, there are lessons from the past, not in terms of what caused it, but what the successful businesses did to move through it and to be one of the success stories out the other side, because that's where the key worker rubber hits the road for us all. So I think the first thing to do, and I've seen on a number of different occasions, is when these things happen, there are two camps of business person. There's the camp that sit there and go, when things get back to normal, when things are as they were camp, and the other camp, which is, right, let's tear up the rule book of what we've been doing, what's worked in the past, and how do we make sure we're relevant and part of the landscape for the world we're now moving into. And you saw at the end of the banking crisis, people in financial services clinging on to the precipice of business models going, oh, when things get back to normal, you know, remember it was great and we all went out and we had huge hospitality bills that we could pay, and banking was great and insurance was great and everything was great. And things weren't like that for many years, and have stayed being very different as the world of compliance and risk and finance kind of became much more to the forefront of decision making, and therefore you had to acknowledge that. And then if you were pitching to a financial services business, a larger one, for a piece of business, the first thing you had to think about was, okay, well, how are risk, how are compliance, how are finance going to think about this? What is the budget that the person I'm talking to has got discretion over? And if it's going to be above that level, then you know, what's his decision-making process? What's his approval process? And build that into my sales model. Some people figured that out quite quickly. Many didn't, and spent 3, 4, 5 years getting really frustrated that the department that had been eagerly going, yes, we definitely want to move forward with this, suddenly seemed to go nowhere, and eventually the sale or the service fizzled out. So I think the first thing is we need to do is to be brutally honest with ourselves about where our business is in terms of relevance for the world we're now going into. We have to assume that this is a new normal, that we're going to be in different phases of lockdown, then releasing lockdown, and then things flaring up, and maybe the company we're working, selling into, or the consumers we're selling into, priorities will change according to what is happening in the sort of, for want of a better phrase, the macro health environment, or even the micro health environment in terms of their household. And those things suddenly have become, as we've seen since March, the most important things. You know, the breakout of humanity amongst us all, when we ask, you know, how are you today? We actually mean it now. And we're also asking, how are you, in terms of getting a read on, do I need to be taking account of anything in my conversation with you, because maybe a relative of yours has gone down with the virus or has gone into hospital or whatever. So these are really important things to be thinking about, how we approach our business, and being brutally honest with, doesn't matter what used to work in the past, who we used to deal with, how it used to work, what is likely to be the case going forward, to make sure our business is positioned to be relevant in the new world. And to do that, I think it's just super helpful, whether you're B2B or B2C, is to walk a mile in your customer's shoes. Because we're into, when this is, you know, this isn't a banking crisis, not a financial crisis, not a third world debt crisis, or a stock market collapse. This is a health, and it affects everybody. Therefore, we're into kind of, for those of you that have studied marketing, we're sort of deep into a form of Maslow's hierarchy of need, in terms of the first thing we start to think about is everyone safe? Are things fine? Are my employees safe? And for a lot of our customers, are their businesses safe? So we go into survival mode. Now, you know, that's a really important thing to understand when we're talking to someone, we're selling to someone, when we're marketing, when we're putting messages out there, is what is their mental state? If I am in survival mode, the only thing I'm going to be switched on to receive in terms of messaging is stuff that is going to help secure that survival mode. And then I move up the hierarchy. So understanding where our customers are enables us not to waste time on marketing or selling to people who are just not in that receive mode right now. And we've all been there, you know, respective jobs, and you sit there as a marketing director, whatever, and if I've got a particular fire I'm fighting at the time, any calls or messages that come in, I immediately do my inbox exercise of, is this going to help the fire I'm fighting? If not, it goes into the other one and probably gets forgotten. So just be aware and cherry pick who you're talking to about what, based on exactly where they are in terms of how they are able to receive and act on the message that we're offering, and to make sure that message is relevant to what is uppermost in their mind at the time. And if it's how do I get my employees back to work, and you happen to be selling very great solutions for hand sanitizer or easy, cheap pop-up screens that you can rent and hand back, you know, when a vaccine is invented, etc., you're going to be in the good camp. You're a solution to the problem I'm thinking about. If you're talking about, hey, we've got a great thing where we can offer fruit for your employees and it's really good, and fresh flowers twice a week, you know, maybe that's a few weeks away before I start to think about how I can make the place pretty. And it's a terrible analogy, but you get the meaning. So don't try and sell to people when they're in a different mode of that kind of hierarchy. So figuring out what that hierarchy is for your specific customers, and be as specific for, you know, customer by customer if you're in B2B, or group by group. Find a different way of segmenting your customers if you're in B2C is a really good idea, because A, it'll save you money on not marketing to people who aren't receiving, but also means you don't burn the opportunity to talk to people by hammering away at them with the wrong message at the wrong time. And I think the final piece is culture. And what we see at times like this is there will be a marked difference with how businesses can cope, depending on the culture they have within their organization. So companies that have a good, helpful kind of, we come to work for more than just the paycheck at the end of the month culture, staff will go the extra mile. They will put up with, you know, irritations about the new world and how they need to operate. They're not going to sit there with their arms folded going, all right, Alice, you want me to come to work? You have to put I want PPE and I want screens and all the rest of it, otherwise forget it, and you can't make me do it, because it's my human right. As opposed to going, oh, look, Alex, I appreciate this is your business, this is really hard work. I'll tell you what, I'll come in on Saturday and I'll see if I can help, and we'll arrange the desks and stuff like that. And companies will be pretty soon finding out what the value of a good organizational culture is going to be, because helpful staff, keen staff who are thinking on their feet and trying to find a way to help the business move forward and thrive, you know, will be at a premium. And if you've invested in that, then you'll see the benefits real soon. But it goes beyond that. Is if you're a business that deals with clients who kind of get the importance of not being the weak link in the chain that suddenly stops paying everybody, and actually go out of their way to try and make sure they do pay their bills on time, because they do understand it's really important for Alice's business, then you've got, your culture is sort of endemic also in the clients you've got, and also your suppliers. So having suppliers who will be flexible, who will say, yeah, we appreciate it's hard and we value you as a client of ours, so how can we help? Payment terms, something else. You'll find out the culture of the ecosystem in which you operate suddenly becomes monumentally valuable. And if you've done all of the other bits and pieces and you still have any breath left in your body, then spending some time on nurturing and establishing the culture of the ecosystem in which you operate will make the next 6, 9, 12 months very, very much easier to navigate. And that's kind of my bit.
Right, so it's really kind of understanding your audience, really understanding what they're going through, positioning your proposition accordingly, and really defining that culture and making sure you've got the right culture setting. So Alex, over to you in terms of how then do we effectively, I guess, channel that, communicate that? What would you like to add?
Yeah, well, definitely a lot of interesting points Patrick has made. I think the point around culture is huge. I see a lot of talk right now about the move kind of, there's like these two sides of things, right, with COVID. There's the perennial, like marketing hasn't fundamentally changed. Marketing is still the same in terms of its fundamental processes and a lot of the approaches that we take. But there is aspects of it that are changing and that are becoming a bit tighter. And we have to shed some weight, and anything that was extraneous, we need to kind of re-examine. And I'm seeing a lot of kind of talk now about a culture market fit that goes along with the product market fit, and how, depending on where your company has been and where it's going, you may need to look again at your culture and how it's supporting your product or service. So that's something I definitely could speak a little bit more about. But I think one thing I'm really interested in this time that I'd like to add, particularly to that culture point, is around the pause, I think all of us over the last few months have kind of necessarily slowed down. And I think that slowdown, as any coach would tell you, is an opportunity to re-examine, okay, what do we really care about? What do our customers really care about? How can we show up to our customers in a way which really listens to them and is careful about them? And also our employees. How are our employees doing? How can we have a humane conversation with them, particularly if we need to let any of them go? How can we be as transparent and as authentic as possible? And I'm really curious about how kind of in previous times we've had to in these kind of pause moments, and specifically pandemics, interestingly, some of the most prolific inventions have come out of those times. Like, for example, in 1348, the Black Death was responsible for kickstarting huge levels of innovation in arts, business, and medicine. Grain farming, for example, shifted towards animal husbandry. Businesses began integrating a concept of efficiency into their operations. And Boccaccio released the Decameron, which was later go on to inspire Shakespeare. This is just one example. In 1665, Isaac Newton invented calculus because he had to go into exile after the Great Plague of London hit the capital. And yeah, he invented calculus, he identified the light spectrum, and a whole series of other amazing inventions. And I think it could not be clearer when we take that moment, when we actually properly take advantage of that pause, which we've all had to encounter, creativity bounces back with the force of a spring gale. It may initially shrink, but I think in times of panic, in times of pause, we have to re-examine we have to slow down with that. Like, I think there's a lot of panic that goes along with it, and that panic can kind of kickstart the fight or flight mechanism. But I think if we properly take that time, that leisure time, and I have a very funny way of describing leisure. Leisure to me is kind of when we properly stop and slow down. I don't know if any of you are familiar with the Pomodoro technique, which is a kind of time management technique where you work for 25 minutes and then you take a 5-minute break. And all of the cognitive scientists and psychologists who kind of know about this technique tell you it works because in those 5 minutes of pause, you don't do any work. You actually stop. You think. In design, it's often called hunkering. You look at what you've just done. You literally lean back and you think, what is that? How far along am I? Is the concept that I'm trying to realize am I going in the right direction, et cetera, et cetera. And I think those moments of pause are really, really important, particularly when they're forced on us. There's a level of grace we can achieve when we actually slow down with those moments.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, giving this time to think around that is absolutely fundamental. I mean, we talked a bit about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and businesses were in survival mode. And potentially still are in survival mode, but then marketing is often seen as an additional cost. How can businesses develop, I guess, bootstrapped or effective marketing budgets on perhaps a lower budget? What things do they need to think around, when potentially they are cutting costs on staff and different areas? What steps do they need to do, and what effective measures can they make during these sort of more financially restrained times?
I think one of the things we've seen startups in particular kind of foster and engender, which is the concept of media partnerships and reciprocal arrangements. So, a lot of media owners will be terrified also right now. There's nothing going on. People are cutting budgets. The amount of airtime they've got, or newspaper pages, or banner sites, or whatever else hasn't changed. But they need success stories in order for people then to ante up and pay for campaigns. And many of the big, as I call them, grown-up media sources have programs for startups and more entrepreneurial approaches. So if you were to approach an ITV, a Channel 4, or one of the big outdoor poster providers and say, we're a small business, we've been absolutely hammered, we've got this great idea for an ad we'd like to run, but we'd like to pay for it on a cost per inquiry, cost per meeting, cost per customer basis, you'd be surprised how in these circumstances people get real entrepreneurial. You don't get hit with, that's not our model, you have to pay up front. People suddenly, yeah, let's talk about it, because they want new stuff to talk about. And a lot of the other media are very concerned that online media have basically eaten their lunch. So the first thing is be bold and think about what media partnerships you might want to do. Secondly, is be really, really clear on what your home media is. So, you know, when we were fighting the fires of the world financial crisis, and I was in my sort of second stint as CMO of Egg, we were really clear the one place we would not go dark was online. And by online, I don't mean performance marketing and paying Facebook a load of money. It was in some of the more alternative online channels where we could actually say what we wanted to say. Because if you just hunker back to performance marketing and Facebook, you're going to be so constricted on the messaging you can use and how you use those channels. It might not be the best thing for you. And don't forget, those companies are very good at telling you that you've got a load of traffic that you may not have got, or it may have not been the traffic you wanted. But again, going back to like, who do we need to communicate? Who do we really want to communicate with? And where do we get at those people most effectively? And then find the most cost-effective way of doing that, rather than just revert to, right, where's the cheapest thing that it looks like we might still be communicating to someone. So don't give up effectiveness just for the illusion of cost effectiveness.
I would add as well, so perfect point, Patrick. I think looking at, I mean, this is kind of completely the opposite of my last response, very kind of open, kind of blue ocean style. I think looking at whether you're in B2C, average order value or average annual contract value when you're in B2B, just looking at kind of who are your top customers, why do they keep coming back to you? Really ensuring that on any new inbound lead forms, you're asking, how did you hear about us? And being as specific as possible, that you have sequences where you can follow up with them. For example, with marketing automation, you need to know when people are how people are finding you during these moments of kind of crisis and change. And also you need to be speaking to your current customers and kind of saying, is there anything that we can offer you? And not doing that in the cursory kind of blast our whole list, kind of, we're here for you. Like actually reaching out to individual ones, getting your biz dev team, reorienting some of their time every week to kind of away from putting on new demos, kind of disqualify more participants and start focusing on your existing customers, focus on the bottom of the funnel and seeing like, what are we actually really offering you and what are we not offering you? Where could we go in the future? What's something you really, really like about us, or that you wish, but that you wish could be a bit better, or what's kind of missing that you think we could be good at? Just kind of starting those conversations and keeping them going as long as possible. I think in terms of strategy right now, listening is the strategy. I think vision afterward, you have to kind of have the CMO in that position of kind of, this is what I feel like where we're going toward. And he can be wrong about it, but at least he has to have a vision. He kind of, like Simon Sinek says, like the CEO is becoming the chief vision officer, and the CMO often is kind of is starting into that place, but then he kind of tries to give that role to the CEO. But I think listening comes first, and then really looking at where our revenue comes from, and looking at what's sustainable during these times. And then from that, building a long tail strategy and looking at kind of what are our options in terms of building out new products and services, what's the core product market fit. And one thing I'm also hearing a lot about right now is kind of category kings or queens, is looking at kind of what kind of category are we defining through our product. It's not kind of being a product leader or market leader anymore. It's about being a category leader. So actually going into a new category. And if you're not a new category, if you're a competitor, obviously the benefit of starting a new category, there's a lot of downsides to it, but then you own that category for a good deal and you're remembered for it. But if you're not in that kind of category definition type of business, then absolutely looking again at kind of what sets you apart. What are your unique differentiators? What do people use you for? And just being kind of holding to that line quite strictly.
Absolutely. You know, obviously as a recruiter, I spend a lot of my time on LinkedIn, and I think a lot of businesses are using LinkedIn as a tool. But also the challenges there is there's a lot of content being pushed out. There's a lot of webinars that are happening. How does a business stand out from the crowd at this current time?
I think so many of these channels now have become, what's the right word for it? They've become a version of what they were set up to be at the outset, and in some cases not a desperately good version. So if you're going to be using LinkedIn, or you're going to be using any of these networks to engage in this stuff, you need to find a way of lifting yourself out of the morass of kind of just generalized content, self-serving content. And things like this, which is a forum, an event, an online event, something that is useful, hopefully, or helpful, or again, just lift it out of the normal broadcast. Here's my 5 points to, whatever it is, the subject you were talking about. And guess what the last point is? And make a meeting with us, we can help. You've got to genuinely give, and as Alex said, you've got to be switched on to receive, 4 times more than you are to broadcast, because people are going to very soon start telling you exactly what you need to know about. Well, actually, we need this product now, we don't need that product, or can you do something to help here? And the right answer can't be, no, sorry, we don't really do that. What we were doing before all this was doing this other thing. Is actually every bit of feedback is potentially what your new business might look like. One thing I've noticed, which isn't so relevant for this conversation, is as a country, unfortunately, we are really crap at selling. And by selling, I mean selling in the best sense of the word. So after the last crisis, I was wandering around keeping a diary of places where I'd gone, where I was trying to buy something or do something, and it was just really frustratingly difficult to part with my money. And this goes all the way from buying a car to buying a lawnmower to buying some carpet, whatever else. And even something as mundane as a few weeks ago, I needed a new pair of Wellington boots. Out there stomping around the countryside. Old Wellington boots had a hole in them, so I ordered this pair of Wellington boots. Nothing happened, had to phone up, blah, 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 blah. Ended up, they said, oh yeah, no, sorry, the supplier hasn't got any. Would you like a refund? And I got my refund really quickly, which was okay, but this has taken 3 weeks, and I had to pop down the garden centre and buy a crappy cheap pair. But nowhere in that station, well, we haven't got those boots. What I can give you is these boots, and I'll give you, the difference in your money back, plus something else. Every interaction, even if you can't, satisfy that customer's needs at that point in time, you've got a customer on the line who's willing to spend money and do something because they have a need that can be fulfilled. Find a way of doing it, because it goes back to my kind of, we're all key workers now. We need to be good at this stuff. The last recession hit, Philip Green, all right, his star has somewhat faded with pensions, mismanagement and all the rest of it. Just said, right, we've all got to work hard now. And he didn't mean we've all got to get into the office at 3 in the morning. He meant we've got to be rotating stock, putting sales, moving things around, store formats, etc. Because for every customer who's got a few quid in their pocket that they want to spend, he wants to capture his share of that, and he knows he's got to work really hard to do it. And sometimes as a country, we're not very good at the early stages of these situations of really going, right, let's get on. This is a time to shine. This is a time to get stuff done. And as Alex said, you can only do that by listening and understanding really what's going on in the world and what your customers are thinking, feeling, and needing.
That's excellent. Could I just speak for a moment there, Alice? Great point, Patrick. I think there's a great writer and software engineer I know called Kevin Simler, who started a blog called Melting Asphalt quite a few years ago now. And he had a great quote, which I've never forgot, which is UX, or user experience design, is etiquette for computers. So I think, and I'll just repeat that again, UX, user experience design, it's kind of the art of designing interactions, being intentional about what the user kind of sees and experiences at each stage of an interaction or process. UX is etiquette for computers. And I really, really love that approach, because it's taking that exact approach to kind of selling and the kind of, are we good at kind of showing up at the right moment to that and meeting that person's intention. I mean, SEO is this in practice. It's kind of, okay, what's the user intent and how do I match that to the keywords that I'm targeting on my website or landing page? And I think designing those interactions in that kind of enthusiastic way. I think one thing that I've spoken a lot about before is kind of how a lot of marketers nowadays see authority, which is kind of a huge part of brand building, and obviously selling stems from clout. And clout is kind of like this old version of authority, which is like, yep, people know about us. We have X amount of reach in our PR coverage. We've got X number of visits on our Google Analytics account. But modern audiences know that that's a kind of counterfeit authority now. And I think marketers know this too. They know it intuitively, if not consciously. And I think the takeoff of influencer marketing is kind of proving that most businesses don't know, or they forgot how to speak with authority, this kind of other form of authority. And what I describe this other form of authority coming from is authentic enthusiasm. Why did you start your business in the first place? What's your story? What do you actually get excited about every week, every month? There's got to be some moments where you're like, oh, this is what I'm here for. This is what I care about. And this is what my audience cares about. And I think that's the trick. I think that a voice that compels others to listen stems from authentic enthusiasm. And I think if you can put that into your digital experiences, into your forums, into your conversational marketing, into your chatbots, into every aspect of your digital presence, then you're going to win. Like it's not too difficult. I think you're literally building in the listening component, which we've been speaking about for the last few minutes, into your kind of scalable marketing processes, which are obviously inbound processes. So I think that's something I really, really care about. And I often speak to CMOs and CEOs nowadays and say, okay, what are you still enthusiastic about? And how does that show up in your marketing? And it's the job of the CEO to care about something. As I mentioned before, even if they're wrong about it, I mean, obviously it can't be criminal and it can't be morally depraved, but if they care about something, people are going to show up to that. They're going to be like, wow, okay, he's enthusiastic about it, and the business is enthusiastic about that. And that will connect you to the tribe of people who are interested in the same things. And you see this is modern brand building and modern marketing in so many ways, particularly on social media, but also in every aspect of how the brand shows up on websites and other experiences. Is if there's a part that they're enthusiastic about, or a whole system or area, then the community will show up around you.
Yeah, I love that. When I speak to sort of founders and you hear the passion of their business, and you kind of then can take that through with you. And if you can take that in the marketing, then absolutely fantastic. Interesting, we had a question just come through from someone who works for a small West London children's charity. They've just started as a volunteer, as a content and social manager. Do you have any suggestions on how to adapt marketing strategies in a non-profit sector to grow their audience? So this is for a small West London children's charity. Don't know which one it is, but any sort of creative ideas that you could suggest in terms of adapting that marketing strategy to grow their audience?
I had a little bit of experience in the sort of social enterprise sector. And the stuff that I've seen work really, really well, it's a complete build on Alex's last point, which I thought was brilliant, which is it's about enthusiasm for the cause. So the great advantage of not-for-profit sector, charitable sector, whatever it is you're talking to people about something that really matters and has an impact. And where you grow your audience for that is people finding other people where actually they want to do something, they want to sort of participate in some way in whatever that cause is and making something happen. So the best stuff is to provide people with things that are shareable amongst their contacts and their communities. There's an awful lot of content put out by charities, which is, to be brutal, is aimed at sort of 60-something-year-old women sitting at home and you'll have somebody crying on TV with a very sad voiceover, and only 20p a day can help, blah, 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 blah. It's difficult to do something with that, which is old school direct response television. But other charities, maybe that are having to look for a younger audience, won't go down that route. But you're looking for shareable content that is not just sad and desperate, but is also positive and uplifting, and examples of how people, by sharing stuff with someone else, could actually make something happen somewhere else in the world. It's kind of the butterfly effect. So when budgets are tight, as they always are in the not-for-profit sector, is really think hard about bits of content, bits of communication, letters that were sent out, anything that's been done that engendered triggered a response, and give people shareable stuff. Friend of mine, Duncan Goose, who runs the One brand, which is the bottled water that gives all of its money to water projects, and he's now got a much bigger thing he's doing in water as well. Basically, the One brand does loads and loads of this. So have a wee look at their website, Daniel, I think it is, that asked the question, and see the sorts of content they've been putting out there, because that is all designed for people to share with their friends and other people. And he got his first 200,000 kind of likes on Facebook by getting someone to sponsor. If we get 200,000 likes on Facebook, we're going to build a well in Malawi to provide water for this village. Bingo, 200,000 likes within 2.5 weeks. That had a different problem, and now all of this, his big sort of social footprint had to be managed, but that's a slightly different problem. But looking for people to engage with you in a way that means they don't necessarily have to put a hand in their pocket, but builds your audience, but then results in something happening. If you can get someone to sponsor that thing happening, there are ways of building your engagement by thinking a bit entrepreneurially about how your content gets distributed.
I would agree with that. And just to also respond to Daniel's point very briefly, so shareable content is absolutely number one, I think. And also, I think there's kind of two steps I can see. There's amplification, which is a perfect example just given by Patrick about kind of sponsorship, media partnerships, anything that can kind of locate that cause within the hearts of the people who actually care about it. And I think a smaller way of doing that as well is events. I think particularly online events nowadays, whether they're your own events or whether you're just going and doing that research about where do people who care about this cause gather. If they already have a place, show up as a person, not as a company, and say, oh, by the way, this is the content we've been producing. Here's an event that we're hosting. Oh yeah, by the way, these people are going to be speaking. Would any of you like to speak? Just engage with them a bit more humanly. In that way. I think events are absolutely massive nowadays. I've started an events program where I'm currently head of marketing at this media and publishing company. And it's just incredible how kind of, if you give people a forum to engage with a topic that they care about, it's massive. It's natural amplification. It's huge word of mouth. So that combined with kind of partnerships and sponsorships is quite a good idea. And I think we've just had someone else ask a question as well. A lot of us have lost our jobs, and it seems like no one is currently hiring. What advice would you give to people trying to find a job? I think generally, there's quite a lot of resources that I could point you towards. If you're in marketing, I could send Alice a list that she could send after this. There's a huge amount of resources that I've been actually currently curating because I have a lot of friends. I'm very lucky to have lost my position in the last few months, but I've kept track of which businesses are hiring. I have a few things to recommend. In terms of people trying to find a job, obviously there's the where to look. I would definitely recommend asking kind of colleagues and mentors to review your CV, to kind of ask, like, what do you think is missing from the CV? What do you think I'm really good at? LinkedIn referrals are massive nowadays, or I can't remember what they're called, but basically getting people to recommend you or endorse you in text form. And then building a little mini presentation. Like, I have a pitch deck on my website, and it's on my CV. At the very top, it says hate CVs, and it's a link, and it will direct people to a little pitch deck, which actually walks through a bit of my experience, the results I've been able to achieve. And I think that's something I highly recommend. CVs are great, but if you can actually point to real examples, you're going to get in the good books of the recruiters, as I'm sure Alice will tell you.
Yeah, I was actually looking at that, Alex. I liked your little CV at the top of your LinkedIn. I think it's maximizing your brand and making sure you're telling people as much as possible all the great things you've done. And on that, Alex, which I think you're very good at in your CV, is you talk about some key stats. And I think especially from a marketing perspective, businesses want to know how you've changed the dial for a startup or a scale up. And I think really talking about some key metrics is fundamental. But what we're noticing, because obviously I have a headhunter's hat on as well as a freelancer platform, and you know, jobs are starting to come back. You know, it was a very different landscape 3 months ago. Literally every day we were losing jobs, and then there was a lull where there wasn't any jobs coming on at all on the permanent side. But over the past few weeks, we've definitely seen that pick up. But actually, more interestingly, we've seen a lot more freelance jobs come through. So I think, you know, when there is a tough market, businesses may not want to take a risk of hiring permanently, because also they're making cutbacks, but there's still jobs to be done. And so maybe it is a time to think about pivoting your career and thinking, well, actually, you know, it might be something that you've always thought about, but this could be an opportunity in which you could freelance. And actually, we've had about 40% uptick in freelance opportunities on the platform over the past sort of 8 weeks. So I think there was, you know, again, we were hit from fewer jobs being posted, but over the past sort of 8 weeks, we've definitely noticed a sharp increase in jobs and people thinking about freelancing. So, you know, keep your skills fresh, even if it means kind of just working on a few projects. Get some content out, get writing, talk about some interesting things. If you're in a vertical also, which is going to sort of take a bit longer to come out of these difficult times, such as travel, or maybe think about pivoting your industry knowledge and writing on topics that you're passionate about and let that passion come through that Alex was talking about earlier. So, you know, think of areas such as e-commerce that are doing much better. Home entertainment is a sector that's doing much better, fitness and health. So maybe start thinking around ways in which you could kind of move into different industry sectors.
Yeah, I think that's extremely good advice. There was another question on sort of if I'm setting up as a freelancer, you know, what else? And I think it depends what life stage you're at, but I have seen no end of sensible, intelligent, career-savvy marketers suddenly get into a situation where they've lost their job or they've decided that freelancing is what they're going to be doing for a bit while the next big thing comes around, and immediately forget everything they ever knew about marketing in terms of how they market themselves. And they'll just suddenly put themselves out. Patrick Muir is now CEO at patrickmuirconsulting.com, available for anything. So I've immediately forgotten, right, what is my proposition? What am I compellingly good at? And which companies now are going to have a shortage of what I'm compellingly good at? And now how do I go and find them and say, oi, you've got a big gap here and I can help you fill it. They just go out going, I can do that, I can help. Please give me some money, give me some employment. To be really specific about what you're great at. And as Alice said, that doesn't necessarily mean the vertical you just come from. You know, I have an enormous passion for sort of environmental stuff. I have passion for all sorts of other bits and pieces. You know, financial services is what I happen to have done an awful lot of in my career, but that's not necessarily where I can bring the most energy. I can bring some of what I've learned there to do other stuff, which I have done. I spent 8 years doing consulting after I left Citigroup for the last time. Well, I was just trying to figure out, I wanted to know what the world was doing. And I did all sorts of weird and wonderful projects in that period. But be really specific about what you're great at and who you're going to target those skills at. Because it goes back to what we were saying at the beginning. I'm sitting there as a CMO, as a hirer or whatever. I'm only going to hire when I've got a specific problem I need to solve. And you need to position yourself as that solution. So your job is to find out, right, what am I the solution for and who might need me? and then go and hammer down some doors. And, you know, networks like Alice's, you know, the Work Crowd and others are really good, because you sign up with them, there is an ecosystem, you get looked after, there is work coming in, and you get to see if you know, if like me, you're a dinosaur and your skill set is big multimedia sort of campaigns on TV and this, that, and the other, and no one's doing that, don't continually troll around the country looking for someone who might want to do some TV, you know, multimedia, direct response and direct mail. If there's a short course you can do, because people only seem to be hiring content writers, or they only seem to be hiring PR people or whatever it is. You've got to find a way, like I said at the beginning, whether you're a business seeking for a strategy or you're an individual seeking a strategy, make sure what you've got to sell is what the world wants to buy. And don't waste time.
Absolutely. I think that's a brilliant place to leave it on, because I think you're absolutely right. I think it's a time where people do need to think, and everyone uses that word pivot. And if you need to pivot your experience and skills, then now is the time to do it and to shout out about it. And interestingly enough, our next series is on PR and reputation management. So that's going to happen next week, lunchtime again. So it's a good time to come and learn about PR and how to manage reputation. And thank you very much indeed, Patrick and Alex, for joining us today and really helping those businesses that have joined to sort of rethink what their strategy is, what their business proposition is, and how to sort of develop an effective marketing strategy. So thank you very much indeed. I've got lots out of it personally, so I'm sure the audience has as well. If they were here, I'd normally say, can we now clap to thank them, but in the virtual world we can't do that. But thank you very much indeed, and look forward to catching up soon.
Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good luck, everyone.
Thank you.